Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Safety in Fleet webinar sponsored by Quartix. Safety and driver wellbeing are critical priorities for fleet decision makers. They influence operational performance, costs, compliance, and organizational reputation, and of course, the well-being and looking after your drivers. During the course of the next hour, we will explore how fleets can deliver measurable safety improvements by taking a holistic approach that considers people, the vehicles, and journey planning. So joining me to discuss today's topic are Tim Fieldhouse, Fleet and Managed Services Director at Balfour Beatty, Jenny Suleiman, Senior HSQE Assurance Manager at Keolis Amy Docklands, Gareth Jones, Group Fleet Compliance Manager at Speedy Hire, and Sean Mayer, Global Sales Director at Quartix. So this is intended to be an interactive discussion, so please do add your own thoughts and feedback and questions to the chat, and I'll refer to them as we go through. We obviously want you to get as much out of the next 60 minutes as possible. And one final point, the views of our panelists are their own views and do not necessarily reflect those of their company. So fleets face so many pressures, including budgetary, but also the focus on transitioning to electric. So how then do you ensure that safety and well-being remain board level priorities rather than being squeezed out by other pressures? That's the first question that I'm going to put to our panel. And Tim, can I come to you first?
Sorry, Stephen, you just froze at that point. Who are you putting it to?
Tim, over to for you for the first point. So, how do you ensure safety and well-being remain board level priorities?
I think for me, it's quite easy. I work for a large construction company, and zero harm is embedded in all that we do. So I've actually genuinely never felt any pressure to compromise on our fleet from a safety point of view. I think it goes as a prerequisite. So the move to anything EV in the transition has always been in that kind of governed by that light. So effectively, if we can't do it safely, we won't do it. So actually, we're focused a lot at the moment. If we can't find the right EV solution, we'll get our ICE vehicles moving much more effectively. So I guess that's probably where a lot of our focus is, on reducing idling, getting our vehicles utilised the most, and making sure our drivers, when they're using them, are as safe as possible. I've never felt any pressure from a budgetary point of view.
Mm-hmm. And Jenny, with all these pressures, all these focuses, challenges for fleets, how do you ensure that safety is top of the agenda?
So having recently just gone 100% electric in our vehicles October last year, this is something that we've kind of gone through very recently. So again, like Tim mentioned, safety is a priority at CAD. So we have our initial safety moments. It's always discussed first to make sure that everybody has their opportunity to raise any concerns or issues, anything like that. So it's always first and foremost anyway, but a couple of ways that we did it was just to make sure that right back at the beginning, we've got a really good, or we try to gain a really good idea of any costs, any areas that we need to preempt that might arise, so that there's no nasty surprises as such. So say if an unexpected cost comes up, the exec don't have to focus solely on that, and because that's kind of the biggest issue at the time, we're able to work through it whilst keeping safety kind of at the forefront and running alongside it. In terms of wellbeing, we have lots of wellbeing initiatives also at CAD as well. So we just continue to run those whilst again keeping the board and the exec up to date with any progress, providing reports and that kind of thing.
Okay, thanks. Gareth, at Speedy, I know you've been focused on safety for a long time. Has it always been that way, or have you had to work to get it to high up on the board priority?
No, not really. I'm quite fortunate that our CEO started off and has done a driving role. So I'm fully supported in everything we do to ensure safety is maintained. It's at the heart of Speedy. Like Tim said, we work closely together as a business colleagues. But it's about empowering your staff to understand how the safety systems are protecting them as well as all other vulnerable road users. We don't just buy something because it's on the market. It's about doing your own work, but putting it out to the drivers as well. They're the end user.
Sean, obviously we've got some of the the higher performing fleets when it comes to safety on the panel, but you must come across many companies that do struggle to kind of get that voice heard at the highest level when it comes to safety. What advice would you have?
Well, I mean, the key point is that the telematics system is non-discriminatory. It will tell you whether somebody is being safe or not. And the advantage that you've got with telematics, from any telematics provider, I guess, is that we're giving you real-time data that is going to be identifying where the risk is, and importantly, the data can be used by the fleet manager, the health and safety manager, and feeling comfortable that they can rely on the data that they're getting. So the highlight of risk, and of course those vehicles that are driving sensibly as well. We've got to remember there are people out there that drive well, but where the risk is coming from, I think the telematics gives you the ability to be able to highlight that, identify that, and then importantly use that information to educate the drivers, the board as well. I mean, typically we see poor driving behaviour coming normally from after long driving days, fatigue, that kind of scenario. And again, the telematics is giving you that very clear information that will tell you that there is a risk, and it will highlight typically what that risk is. And it is normally based on driving time, driving too fast, the normal things that we all kind of know. But the telematics just gives you that information that you can rely on and trust, really.
Yeah, just building on that, Sean. So, when you look at the Quartix data, what are those kind of common safety risks that you see amongst car and van drivers, and is it the same across both asset types?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think the first thing that we identified is that the most important thing is making sure the vehicle is compliant before it even starts in the morning. So we launched our inspection app a couple of years ago, and we're starting to find there's a big uptake on that, because that gives you the audit that before the vehicle's even driven, the first thing the driver is asked is, are you fit to drive? I mean, that's a really important question. They're asked, are they fit to be able to do their job? But nobody ever thinks about the bit that gets them to the job. And that's the first thing of, yes, I'm fit to drive. I'm going to be in control of the vehicle, which at the end of the day is a lethal weapon if it's not looked after properly. So the first move is for us is that vehicle safe? Confirm that it's safe, and if there is a defect, it can be reported. And then from that, the obvious thing then comes, it's the speed again, it's the driving pattern, it's the behavior, it's how long's that vehicle been driven in between breaks. If somebody's jumping in a van, there's no legislation that says after 2 hours they should stop and take a break, whereas in an HGV it's slightly different. So we're finding more and more customers are looking now at the fatigue element of the driving practice as well, and saying, we want a policy now that if we drive for more than 2 hours, there's a 15-minute break, or if the day exceeds more than a utilized day shouldn't be, for example, more than 12 hours. Some companies want that shorter, but again, it's giving people the ability to identify and understand that the risk is coming about by virtue of that driving behavior, or the vehicle not being inspected properly before it even hits the road. And we are genuinely finding more and more. I've been doing this for 25 years, same amount of time that Quartix has been going, to be fair. And I'm finding that I'm speaking to more and more people on health and safety now than I've ever done. It was always the fleet manager 20, 15 years ago. Now it's a bit more about, how can we make our vehicle fleet safer? And the starting point, as I say, check it before you drive it, and then once it's being driven, is it being driven in line with the road speed? Is it being driven sensibly with the right amount of brakes? And again, what does the workload of the employee look like? Are you putting too much pressure on them to do too much in one day, which means they can't get to each location quick enough without breaking speed limits or breaking rules around driving time? So that's kind of what we're seeing.
Okay, thanks for that. Gareth, how are the types of challenges, the risk challenges that Speedy faces changed over the years? Oh, can't hear you at the moment, Gareth. You're on mute.
There you go. Yeah, I think for us, the risk is still relevant on the road, and we all, we have our safety systems, we have our driver training and the vehicle apps. But what we're noticing as well now is that when we go on customer sites, they're now adopting those same principles of site, site driving, site risk assessments, and going that next step as well now with the PPE requirements. So it's good. It's that last mile onto somebody's construction site was once a forgotten subject, and now that's starting to be deemed as the same sort of like public highway. So that's a good for us. That's really good.
Tim, I saw you nodding there. I mean, are there similar sort of risk challenges that you're facing, or are there other kind of issues that you're having to address, and what are you doing about them?
Interesting, I'm nodding because I'm having a very live discussion with Gareth and his peers about driving onto our construction sites. But that's actually not probably my biggest challenge at the moment. The thing I'm interested in doing, and Sean, apologies, it's sort of not unrelated, but it's actually getting OEM data better used. We have both short-term hire and our core fleet, and rely on plug-in units. And I would love to get better at using the telematics providers to surface far more of the OEM data rather than just relying on plug-in units, because that has limitations if they break, etc., etc. And actually, by getting the OEM data right, I think we can leverage how people are driving, proactive maintenance. The driver identification piece is a challenge, so that's something we're working through. It's not easy, but if we can crack getting OEM data better used, I think for me that would make a huge step forward, because then we get consistency. If the vehicle starts, we get the data instantly, and that's the piece of the puzzle I'm really keen to try and push forward, but we're not there yet.
We spoke about policies needing to engage at board level, but obviously there's a range of key stakeholders that any policy needs to engage in order to be successful, in particular the drivers themselves. So how do you do that without them feeling kind of monitored, blamed, or over controlled? Jenny?
So at CAD, we actually have a restorative just culture embedded into our operations, our procedures in general. The main purpose of that is to make sure that colleagues feel safe, supported. So should they be involved in a safety, for example, they're happy to work with us to find out, right, what happened, what is it we can learn from this situation or from this event. We're very much a learning organisation, so it's learning from what's going very well as well as what's not quite gone well and we need to prevent from happening again. So as part of restorative just culture, if we do have an event, we start with, instead of a interview, for example, we'll have a learning conversation. So it's meeting with that person again, finding out exactly what has happened from their perspective, understanding why they acted. Part of that question is, tell me about your day. How did that start? Were you tired? Were you stressed? Was there that might have impacted your day? So we're gaining that trust. We're really working with colleagues to understand what it is that affects, and so we can build that into the policies. Any changes, any reviews we're doing, we've actually taken their views, their perspectives and their opinions. Safety role, so as well with any policies, procedures, the key thing is working with those people. You've employed for that role, so as the experts actually get a really good insight from the day-to-day challenges they face. You can go through, well, we've got this procedure, what we're trying to achieve, or this is where we're trying to get to. You as the person doing this role and doing these tasks on a day-to-day basis, this would work, or what do you suggest according to as safety? So I think the main thing is just including them in any changes, decisions, policy, so that the people, again, that's affected by these changes feel as though they've actually got a say in those changes and it works in practice and doesn't make their day a bit more difficult when it doesn't need to be, basically. We also have fleet champions, so we have the quarterly fleet champion meetings, and again it's a way of meeting with them, really giving them the opportunity to come to us with any questions, concerns they have, as well as us being able to go, just giving them any updates. Or, for example, again, when we were introducing our new fleet, it was our opportunity of letting each team know what's going on, just in the loop, and they understood how it impacted them, and then they could feed that back to the team. But it's just include them, engage with them, and make sure that they're able to have a bit of say in whatever you're going to be asking them to do.
Okay, definitely engaging and making them feel part of the process is crucial. There are a couple of bits there where you broke up a little bit. I don't know if it's because of the background that's affecting your bandwidth. It might be depending on what you've got in your background, might be worth just taking it off if possible. Gareth, a similar thing for you? I saw you sort of nod in about that, kind of making drivers feel included and part of the process.
Yeah, your drivers make up or especially they make up the majority of our workforce, and if you empower them to be involved, then it's almost like stealth marketing. They're on board. Show them the benefits and explain the benefits, and don't train them in a subject just to cover a piece of legislation or regulation. Train them in a subject that's going to benefit them, to keep them safe and do their role better. It's very much for us about, like Jenny's just alluded to, giving the driver, there's no point giving a driver I don't know, a curtain-sided vehicle if he's going to be loading something that can't be loaded through the curtains. It's you've got to engage with the drivers. That when Aaron and myself were looking at designing a few items with the drivers, we got the drivers involved. It's their office, it's their tool to use. It's so and some of these guys, regardless of years driving, actually sometimes come out with the best ideas and the most simple ones. So as Jenny's alluded to, they're your biggest workforce, and people just need to listen to what they've got to say, because it's some really valuable information.
Absolutely. Sean, sort of advice, when you're out there talking to fleets, how do you get them to, or how do you advise them to introduce policies that drivers can buy into and get engaged with?
I mean, the first thing to be saying, the UK, the telematics industry is a very mature technology. It's been around a very long time. I think people are aware that it is a tool there for the good, rather than, as I say, going back years ago where it was very much a big brother scenario. The key thing I say to every company I'm talking to is bring it in as part of your driving policy. Make sure people are aware that telematics is there. When you're out on the road, everybody's a professional driver. People think I'm working on a building site, I'm an electrician, I'm a plumber. You're not. You're actually a professional driver, because that's what you're doing to get to and from work. And I think what we try to do with our system is make sure that they get involved. Again, going back quite a number of years ago, Tim, I'm going back to Balfour Beatty. I remember you had a guy called Nobby Clark working for you, and Nobby Clark, I remember having to go up and do a speech after him once, after he'd explained his role as a police officer, having to go and tell people somebody had been killed in a crash because they'd been on their phone. And I thought, well, that was one heck of a thing to have to follow. But the point he made was that there is so much noise in a vehicle. Don't make any more noise than you need to make. And I suppose this could be slightly controversial. We don't believe in the in-cab alerting system, for example. We think that is a genuine distraction. So what we do is we talk to our customers about giving drivers the ability to review their own performance in an environment where it's safe, and that's through our mobile phone app. So they can look and they can review their own performance after the event. Like I say, you said at the beginning, Stephen, that everybody has their opinions. So for us as a business, we made a moral decision a few years back that we would go down that route. And we have mixed feelings on that. Some companies say, no, we want that. And if they do, that's absolutely fine. We understand it, but it's not what we do. But I think what we're trying to do is assure the driver that there is nothing magical going on in the background that's going to make them look bad if they're not bad. And so bringing them in, getting them to be aware that the product is there to support them. And, quite often the phone calls we get asking around crash reconstruction, et cetera, is about mitigating claim to help the drivers where they're being accused of something they haven't done. So get them bought in, get them seeing what the information is. And again, quite often now we get invited to toolbox talks where we actually demonstrate and show what the whole Quartix system can do. So there's no mystique behind it. And as I say, most company drivers now make the assumption that there is a tracking system in their vehicle, because most people do use it. It's a very saturated market in the UK. It's very rare to find a company that isn't using a tracking system. But bring it in, make it policy, make sure the drivers understand what the advantages are for them, because it's there to protect them as much as it is you as the employer, and of course the general public. And just take away all the mystique around what telematics is. But it's there to protect them. It's there as a compliance, safety and utilization tool. So, yeah, we just tell them to make sure everybody understands what it's there and why they're bringing it in.
So obviously we talked about now drivers and at board level. As Graham Hine puts in the chat, there are other stakeholders out there. For him personally, as HR, there's trade unions, insurers, risk, health and safety. I mean, the trade unions is an interesting one. Does any of the fleets have to deal with the trade unions? And in which case, how did you get them on board with things that you wanted to do? Jenny, you're nodding, so I'm afraid I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, no, we've got a really good, strong relationship with the union, obviously being railway. But it's kind of along the lines of making sure we are including them, we're giving the opportunity to raise concerns on behalf of the members, and it's making sure they've got a good understanding of why we're doing what we're doing and why things are in place. But again, it does come back to that same thing of just engaging with them, including them, got the opportunity to kind of have a say. But any ideas before, I'm always very mindful of sitting behind my desk and making all of these decisions for people that are actually doing the work and where the impact is placed on them. So have that say that impacts them is ideally positive and doesn't impact them negatively for their day-to-day work.
Gareth, is it something that affects you? You have to deal with trade unions and get them on board. What do you do? You're just on mute, Gareth.
Yeah, we don't have the trade unions, but what, like I said earlier, we engage with all the drivers and let them see the positives of the systems. Just engage with the drivers,
You've got a few internet problems there. It's not just affecting me, is it? No, just got a few problems hearing you there, Gareth.
Both myself and the fleet director, we put cameras into our cars so that we could. So for me, that earned a lot of kudos, and I bet you haven't got one when I have.
Okay. If I just move on to talk about sort of mental health, fatigue, and stress, and the roles that those play in collision risk, and how are you guys, how are fleets practically addressing this? Tim, can I come to you first?
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully my internet's not playing up for you, Stephen. I guess relative to what Sean said earlier, when he talked about being fit to drive, one of our golden rules is we have 4 golden rules across Balfour BT, not related to driving, related to all of our works, and one of them is be fit for work. And actually, I think if you're not there physically and mentally, we've noticed across the whole portfolio, not just driving, we're not a driving business, we're a construction business with people who do drive as part of it. And if you're not fit for work, that's when incidents happen. We can trace back the root cause of incidents, and one of them be not being fit for work. So absolutely is a cornerstone of what we do. We're a big fan of measuring and monitoring. We think if it's measured and monitored, then it's controlled. So we put a lot of stall in giving the line managers and the people putting people to work the information about when their first and last ignition times are of a day for their team, so they can begin to understand, not saying that people would necessarily be working all that time, but just so they can begin to get a picture of when their people are doing stuff. We have league tables. We kind of surface areas where we're concerned, where people are doing over 2-hour journeys. We then, as Sean mentioned earlier, we measure that. We tell businesses where their people internally, where we've got drivers who are consistently doing over 2 hours. Within my own particular division, one of our fitters, we're doing this, and we clocked actually his first and last ignition times. We're tracking out where we thought they'd be. We then began to look at his fatigue management, and actually we made an intervention and stood him down and said, actually, do you know what? We need to just give you a bit of time to reset. Clearly, we need to replan the works to give you the opportunity to reset. And that's not something we're not afraid to do. We're not afraid if we can see people have a danger of not being fit for work, we will make that intervention. And I think part of it is giving the line managers, the people putting people to work, that information to hand. So it's not something that's hidden in a spreadsheet miles away. It's actually something in the front line. They can go, actually, yep, I can clock that Johnny or Jane, we're asking them to do a bit too much. They're therefore, and let's realign what they do. And that's something we kind of measure quite methodically now. It's having that kind of effect.
Thank you. And Jenny, I think you do quite a bit around the mental health and fatigue element. So do you explain some of the practical things that you do?
Yep. So we have a number of wellbeing initiatives, activities. So firstly, we've got our wellbeing champions, so our wellbeing ambassadors. So these are colleagues across the business who people across business can approach and just ask for kind of a bit of signpost, of support, just so that they can speak with someone about what's available to them, regardless of what the issue is. It could be workplace stress, it could be fatigue, all of that kind of stuff. And then the wellbeing ambassadors can help with, right, where do we start with resolving this? But it can also be the external issues as well. So coming back to the collaborative just culture, those learning conversations where we start with, tell me about your day, how did it start? In terms of the role that health, wellbeing, fatigue plays on level of risk for our drivers, that's the information we need to know about. So again, did you have a broken night? Are you very stressed at the moment? What are those factors that could have an impact on your day going forward? And building that confidence so that our drivers and all of CAD staff can actually go to their manager, say at the beginning of their shift, and say, look, this is what's going on. I feel stressed, I feel really tired, whatever it is. Able to any safety event like that before it becomes, find those factors have contributed and try to prevent it initially. As well as that, we have health fairs. So we have occupational health practitioners come in twice a year who do kind of give you a good overview, and part of that overview is also taking into account well-being. So people, again, looking at their sleep, looking at their stress levels, all of those well-being factors, as well as the physical health. And it's just a way of to take a bit of control of their health before it happens. We also bring in health monitors so that people can drop in, keep an eye on their health, and again, including well-being. We offer massages around particular days, so mental health awareness week, men's health, menopause, all of those kind of factors, and all of those kind of areas we hold lots of sessions and activities around them. So, we do think things like health, well-being, fatigue, risk, especially try to make sure that the conversation is always open, there's always support available, and that there's an array of services and initiatives available, so that perhaps if someone doesn't quite feel at a place where, for example, they could go to an employee assistance programme, they might have their manager or a colleague who's a wellbeing ambassador in place, or they've got various other initiatives that they can join in with so that they can seek some sort of help with their health.
Okay, thanks. We got most of that. There was still a little bit of instability, I think, on the connection, but you did actually answer, I think, Louise Elston's comment around does anyone have those routine health screenings for BP checks and diabetes screening, etc., which sounds like you very much do. Gareth, hopefully you're back and operational. What do you guys do in terms of mental health, fatigue, or stress? How does that play a role in your risk policy?
Yeah, so mental health, we're really well supported. We have a calendar for 2026. January was Beat the January Blues. February is Heart Month. March is Health Month and Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. Just to name it a few. September is Happiness in the Workplace Week. So, we do look at mental health. Every single depot has a mental first aider or somebody they can reach out to. We also have an employee assistance program, which offers our colleagues many different avenues of mental health, whether that be financial or health or just some telephone numbers really, which can give that person, you know, somewhere else to speak to somebody who may not be directly connected to them, but you know, can help them on the road. And I think as well, we also have time to talk, which for people like myself who go into different locations, it's just time for talk and just sit down with the team and just you know, speak to people on their level, and it's great. I mean, I feel proud to say that we have a wellbeing calendar which tells us what's going on. International Men's Day is in November. You know, it's great. April is stress awareness month, so yeah, got plenty to look at.
Okay. Carl Bartlett asked in the chat whether anyone actually has kind of pre-start wellbeing briefings and end of day meetings to establish if drivers are experiencing any fatigue or mental health issues. Does anyone take it to that level? I guess probably if there's been some alerts on telematics that have indicated there might be some issues with a driver during the day. Does anyone look at it to that degree on a daily basis?
Yeah, we have driver debriefs on a daily basis, or when they come back to the depot, and I think that's really important. The transport and office staff are, you know, engaging with the drivers, you know, throughout the day, not just at the end of the day to you know, make sure and honest in a workplace where we, you know, everybody is the same. Everybody's a person, is a colleague, and that's where we are.
Tim, were you going to come in on that point as well?
I was going to say, yeah, not necessarily just purely well-being, but absolutely, we'd always have a pre-start and a end-of-shift briefing. So absolutely, we would try and engage and get the teams to engage. I fear my internet may have also gone down now.
No, we can hear you fine.
Can you hear me okay, Stephen? Is it still working? Oh, perfect. Yes. So we'd always, as teams, we'd always, another one of our golden rules, one of the 4, is always receive a briefing. And absolutely, at the start of each shift, we'd expect everybody to receive a briefing. And then as part of that, you'd be checking in with each other to make sure that you are fit, understand what you're doing for the day, understand you've got all the tools, all the equipment, including the vehicle that you need to do your task. And we put heavy emphasis on the supervisors to do this. They run this briefing, and we developed an e-learning tool for our supervisor community to talk about the obligations and also the requirements in terms of transport compliance and looking after your people. So that's something we very much put a lot of stall on.
Okay, thanks for that. Sharon Mitchell's put in a bit about driving for better business as well for their driver wellbeing toolkit. Sorry, Gareth, were you going?
I was going to say the other key point from a telematics perspective is, of course, we will also be able to provide the tools to say this vehicle hasn't had a break today. So by the end of the day, managers, supervisors, senior management would be aware of that. And again, built into our inspection app scenario, we've got an incident report. So if somebody is suddenly feeling unwell or there is a problem, they can hit that and it will immediately send an alert back to the office. So if somebody is taken unwell or, you know, there is a concern, again, that's stuff that can be highlighted through telematics, of course, as well. So, yeah.
Okay. So Sean, just staying with you, I mean, how do you tailor safety and wellbeing interventions for different driver groups? So, you know, grey fleet users, company car drivers, vans, HGVs. Should you be taking the same approach, or are there different things you should be doing for each of those parts of the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that risk is risk. It doesn't matter what you're driving, does it? I mean, we were very, very heavily involved years ago in the young driver insurance market, and we built our safe speed database from that, which was all about contextual speed. But we realized that if you take the word young and change it to fleet, it's the same risk. It's just the risk is with an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old rather than a 40 or a 50-year-old. But at the end of the day, if people are driving inappropriately, it doesn't matter what you're in. I suppose some people may say there are more rules around an HGV because it's got a limited speed. It has to make the relevant stops in line with working time directive, and they legally have to do vehicle checks. But again, I suppose if an HGV is involved in an accident because somebody's tired, it's going to do a lot. There's a lot more damage going to be done by a 44 tonner than a me driving in my Polestar, for example. But I think that the underlying element here is that the vans and the cars that are out on the road, there is no legal requirement for anybody to inspect that vehicle before they get in it. There's no obligation to take any breaks. I could jump in my car now and drive to Scotland, meet a customer for 10 minutes and drive back again. And under no law have I done anything wrong. I mean, it would be pretty stupid to do it, but there's no law. So I suppose we tend to deal mostly with the vans and car fleets, in fairness, within Quartix. And we're trying to make the point to the customer that when you're looking at this data, you should be looking at things. The safety isn't just about, is somebody speeding? Speeding is a massive risk. We understand that. And speeding too fast for a road type, again, massive risk. But so is somebody that's been on the road since 5 o'clock this morning and at 7 o'clock they're still driving. The same again, if somebody's driving with heavy acceleration and braking, and if they are on a country lane doing 45 miles an hour, that blind Ben might say that they should only be doing 30 mile an hour. So not breaking the speed limit. But again, we're assessing that contextual risk, and that's something we've been banging the drum about for many years. When we first brought contextual speed out, people said, "Well, my driver's not speeding. I'm not going to pull him up on that, am I?" And it's like, okay, I understand that, but if somebody's driving along a country rural lane that's got it has a target. The target isn't 60. It's telling you that's the national speed limit. That blind bend or that bendy curvy road is actually quite a big risk, because if they're going around that too fast, the chances are they're going to end up in a ditch. So we start to look at the contextual side of things. And interestingly, I was listening to a webinar that was run by you guys that I was sat on last year, and it was made by one of the insurance companies, and it was a really phenomenal point. He said, when we're overtaken on a rural road, we see this long stretch and we think we've got loads of room to overtake, and so we put our foot down and we go. But he said somebody coming in the opposite direction is seeing exactly the same straight that you are. So actually, you've only got 50% of the road. And I have to be honest, it was a light bulb moment in my mind. And so I'm saying to customers, looking at this contextual speed that you're seeing on these country roads is as important as somebody breaking the speed limit. So long answer, but to get to the point, yes, you should treat everything differently. Everything the same. But I do think that the car and the LCV market is slightly different in the fact that it's not governed by the same rules as HGV.
Mm-hmm. Tim, is that how you would see it as well? Treating everything the same, but recognizing there are some differences between trucks and cars?
Exactly right. Like I said, we don't actually differentiate between the type of driver. We obviously have different parameters, but we offer a permit to drive for everybody who wants to drive in Balfour Beatty effectively, and that's a risk-based approach, and that would look at obviously age profile, endorsements, crash history, member of public complaints, incidents, telematics, all of those things. And it's not a you get your permit to drive and you're then free for the year forever. It's a constantly reviewed piece. And I think Anthony in the chat asked, does anyone do one-to-one coaching and driving? Absolutely. So actually, off the back of this, we have a whole team and our driver risk team who will go out there, look at the high risk drivers and say, actually, do you know what? Not you can't drive, but actually in order to drive, we want you to be aware of these things. Can we have a look and can we have this conversation about? And that's kind of a really important part of what we do as a fleet team is treat everyone the same, get the permit to drive, get the same base information, but then use that information to tailor the response. Some people will get an e-learner, some people will get an assessment, some people will get on-road coaching, and some people will get some restrictions about what they're able to drive until we're kind of confident and comfortable that they are in the right place to drive items.
Okay.
So it's definitely a one-size-fits-all approach in terms of everyone gets... Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Take those points. Tim, I'm just going to stay with you because we've talked a bit about the driver and about that kind of engagement piece as well. But obviously, vehicle safety technology is growing all the time, and there's a lot more kit particularly on cars, but it's increasingly on vans and trucks as well. Are there particular safety technologies that you seek out? Are there things that deliver particular reductions in incidents or claims? So Tim, that one's to you.
From my point of view, it's not technology per se. It's all one of the aspects of it, but it's actually our compliance and driver risk teams getting out and having those face-to-face engagements, actually speaking to people. Do you understand what your behaviour is doing? Do you understand the risks you've got? I think that's what we've seen the real difference. That's been the game changer. It's not just knowing the information, but it's how you use it. It's putting it in the hands of the line managers, putting it in the hands of the drivers, so they themselves can see, actually, I'm driving the most riskily out of everybody within my business unit. Perhaps I need to consider myself, look at myself and look in the mirror. So I think that's the piece we've seen. We've seen the technology supports us in getting out there and having the right conversations.
Gareth, from your point of view, vehicle technology, are there certain safety things that you would insist on, or the things that make a real difference?
And again, it's about ensuring that the drivers are fully aware. It's okay having a great system, but if they don't know how to work it, then it's a waste of time having it. So for me, I love to engage with the drivers, but it's also about collaboration, like Tim also alluded to earlier. We had two of his colleagues come over to Speedy the other day, and it's about sharing data and information with each other to, about new innovation products that they've seen or we've seen. But I think the way that risk is now on the road is, cameras now are a stealth market for drivers to understand that they're not there as an enemy or a watching tool. They're there to protect you. And we've had at least more than a handful of times now where there's been an allegation, but the cameras have proven us to be, deemed as a witness, not as the guilty party in a road traffic collision. So that message is now starting to filter through quite quickly. And again, that then, for me, the cameras are great. The side scan systems need a little bit of work on their HGVs. They're still sometimes quite poor in certain weather conditions. But as for the cameras and the telematics, again, as long as you've engaged with the drivers and they know how to use the system, they're great tools.
So talking about the telematics and the camera data, what in particular, Sean, are going to come to you on this. What safety data should fleets be relying on most? And how do they turn that data into action rather than it just being something that turns up on a dashboard?
Yeah, I think the first thing is always going to be we start off with every customer and we show them the league table. And I think a league table is the risk league table, that is, obviously, and it's showing you where your lowest risk drivers are, where your highest risk drivers are. And we've seen companies that have been quite happy to start producing that as an internal document, league table, showing relevant teams, where they sit in that league. I mean, with the best will in the world, if we use the football analogy, nobody wants to be a Wolves fan at the moment. They're bottom of the league, and everybody wants to do their best to get up that league. So I think when we use that analogy and we start to show those and they get shared, we've seen customers see significant changes in their insurance claims. Obviously, fuel as well, because if people start driving more sensibly, you're going to see less in the way of fuel use. Taking it back as well, making sure the vehicles have been inspected. We'll report on a vehicle if it's been driven without the inspection, because again, that's your first safety risk. We said that right at the beginning. If the vehicle hasn't been checked to make sure it's roadworthy, how do you know it's roadworthy? So we look at the ability to confirm the vehicle was safe before it went away. Looking at the league table, which takes into account acceleration, braking, speed, all the bits and pieces you would expect. And as you guys have all alluded to now, the cameras is also a new thing. Being able to pull footage of a potential incident. If you see some heavy braking, and it's an unusual event, and being able to hit the button and pull that data through and look and see what's gone on. Or again, most of the customers we deal with have got very liveried vehicles. It makes people an easy target for false claim. Being able to say, well, look, we didn't identify any speeding issue at this point, but look, we've even been able to pull the footage to show that hasn't been the case. Then, you're protecting that, you're protecting your operative, you're protecting your business. And, hopefully that means, again, less false claims being made against you, but operating a very safe fleet that you're sharing with your workforce. So don't be scared to use league tables. Definitely make sure that the vehicles are checked before they go. And the introduction of being able to produce live camera footage through the system is kind of starting to become a game changer for people.
Jenny, is there certain data that you use to improve the safety of your fleet?
So with our new vehicle technology that can do exactly what Sean was just talking about, where we can track harsh accelerating, harsh braking, if any speed limits are exceeded, all of that kind of driving style data. So we're now in a position where we've had some of the vehicles for a few months, so we can start to look at any trends. Are there particular times of the day? Are there particular routes? Is it particular vehicles, teams, drivers, all of that kind of stuff? So it's mainly kind of the driving style data that we're going to start looking at from now, just so that we can look at, well, do we need to provide a bit more information, training, a bit of a reminder, or does it mean that we need to start asking the teams to plan their work a little bit differently, different times of the day, that kind of thing? So yeah, mainly for us, it's the driving style data that we can start really utilising from now with our new vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Okay, see Gareth just flash on and off the screen there. I was going to come to him, but let's stick with Jenny. If I can just stick with you to talk about the kind of influence that journey planning has on safety outcomes as well, and you know, is there times where fleets can underestimate the risk of the actual journey itself?
And that probably kind of leads on nicely to what I was just saying about the time of day and the type of work you're doing, the type of vehicle you're driving. So a lot of these are very, very local. It's in a built-up London area. So we've got a number of vulnerable road users, so pedestrians, vehicles. We're quite heavily surrounded, basically. And I think complacency comes into it as a risk for it, because they're doing the same journey, they're going to the same places. You know, our end location never changes, and we've got a number of drivers who have been with us for quite some time, so you know, they know these routes off the back of their hand, and all it takes is a tunnel to be closed or something like that, and they're suddenly in a rush, or we've got an emergency that they need to get to at a particular station that's 5 or 6 miles away, so they're in a rush and there's loads of traffic, anything like that. So in terms of journey planning, we just do simple things like the TfL's email that they send out, I think it's Thursday or Friday of every week, with, you know, the upcoming road closures, upcoming events, things like that. Send that out to our drivers and say, take this into consideration for any planned works you've got on for the next week, but also your journey into work as well, because we don't want people, again, arriving in a rush and flustered and stressed because they've been stuck in traffic or there's some kind of road closure somewhere. So it's just making sure that it enables our drivers to be prepared and aware of where they're driving, the areas they're driving in, if it's close to schools, things like that, and are they driving around, you know, school start or finishing times. It's just making them really aware of what's going on in the area that they're driving and the kind of work that they're carrying out in that area as well.
Okay, Gareth, how do you use data? How do you make sure it's meaningful and actionable?
Gosh, I think the data that comes in now is coming in from a multitude of sites, and you know, it's sometimes difficult to quantify it all into one space to actually get the benefit from it. You know, you get your telematic data, you get your tachograph data, you get your camera data, you get your delivery and collection data, etc., etc. So what we tried to do now is as best we can use, you know, AI powered systems to you know, link all the systems together, really, to get the most out of that data. But it's about
a couple of key points there where Gareth just froze on us. I think he was going to talk about the use of AI, and actually that was quite a good time to talk about that with the question that Victoria Carter has asked around relying on fleet management software. You might be back now, Gareth. But she asked around prompts for action and how you kind of manage all that data. Go on, Gareth. Back on.
Yeah, so when you gather all that data, I think it's about collaborating all the data using the tools that are around you, like Power BI and the AI sort of like programs, to then get the best out of the data. There's a lot of data, and if you don't manage that data, the old saying is, if you get the data, you need to manage it, not just ignore it. There's no point getting it if you're not going to do anything with it and make the best from it.
Mm-hmm. Sean, I guess it's relevant for you as well, the question that Victoria asks, because as Gareth was saying, there is a lot of data coming in from various different areas. How do you ensure you are able to manage it, particularly when you're in her case running 700 vehicles with 1.5 heads?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing as well is that we sometimes will have people that want to have one product that does everything. And I think let's be open, that's very hard to find. What we start to find with some of our customers is that they start to use the ability to have an API where they'll pull our data, for example, into their scheduling system, or they'll be pulling our data into another area. We almost treat it like a cog, or some people call it the pedal, where you're the bud in the middle and the pedals are coming off, and the tracking data is being fed into different areas through open APIs, allowing all of the experience of each individual company to come together with one end result. And as I say, we do quite a bit of that around the planning and routing for some of our customers, where they've got engineers on the road and they've got to be at a certain place at a particular time. The advantage of having the live data comes in, knows whether it tells you whether you're on time, whether you're ahead of schedule, whether you're behind schedule. So really for us, we don't want to be a jack of all trades. We just think we should specialize in what we do well, but then give people the ability to be able to take that data. And as Gareth kind of alluded to, you can be putting that into other systems, operating AI, whatever it might be, to say, right, we've got the experts in each area giving us the information. Let's now build our own dashboard with that kind of data to help us, I suppose, sort out the noise that isn't relevant. There's a lot of white noise. You want to get the important stuff that all of the systems can bring together, and that definitely is by pulling it all into a back office and almost giving you the ability as the user to get the information you need to be precise and not be sort of blinded by too much data. Sometimes it's great to have data, but it can also be dangerous to have too much data, because if you get too much of it, you don't know what to do with it. So pull out the important bits that matter. So that's kind of our advice on that.
Okay. We alluded to this earlier around, obviously you're all running critical fleets in important areas. You've got to hit schedules, you've got to do deliveries, or you've got to get to a place on time. How do you kind of balance that off, the time critical nature of your work with kind of safety, so you don't undermine the service delivery, but you're also taking care of drivers and not putting too much pressure on them? Gareth, how would you approach that?
Yeah, so we've got a routing system which allows us and takes into consideration with the rules set within the system for the speed limits, the type of vehicle, the regulation rest periods and break periods that are also required, and that then will then generate the jobs, whether that's a delivery or a collection throughout the day. So the system itself won't let our staff overload a driver. But the system will also actively, if a driver is then driving back to the depot and he's still got space to do a collection, the system will understand he's still got half a van and will then throw that collection onto him as he's coming back.
Tim, similar question to you. How are you able to sort of weigh up the need to run a time critical, mission critical fleet with ensuring you have the safety elements for the drivers?
I'll be honest, we're probably in a slightly different place to Gareth, in that our fleet drivers tend to drive to somewhere to do a job. So there's not a time criticality on their driving. And so we don't have the same pressures as such. So we're able to kind of plan our works. Coming from a construction background, there's a lot of emphasis on planning and scheduling. So actually, it's kind of a natural kind of add on to our day-to-day operations. If you've got to do a crane lift, you have a certain amount of time to do it. If you've got to build a brick wall, you've got a certain amount of time to do it. And the same is for the driving. So it's very different to a courier company where you're kind of very much measured on that metric. We don't measure our number of deliveries, speed of access, etc. in that way. So probably we're slightly different to the other businesses. That said, there's always going to be cases where an intervention is required, whether that's telematics or whether that's because there's been an incident or because we've had something highlighted from a member of the public, etc. And at that point, our teams are very good at being back to Jenny's point about a just culture. Actually, there seems to be that kind of culture. If an issue is raised, people get on with it, deal with it appropriately. It's not about a kind of witch hunt. It's actually about understanding the reason why, the root cause analysis, and then trying to learn to don't do it again, don't repeat, and move forward.
Okay. Right, final question, I think, looking at 5 minutes to go. Tim, staying with you because your internet, fingers crossed, is just about holding up. What measure or technology or change to operating practices from a risk perspective have you introduced that's made the single biggest positive impact on driver safety?
Again, it's across the portfolio for every operation we do. Engineering controls are probably, and that would be kind of the physical things we could do, are probably the last line of defense rather than the first line of defense. Actually, behaviours is where we're kind of trying to go. It's the hearts and minds. So our driver risk team getting out, doing on-road coaching, going out and doing safety stand downs, getting engaged with the frontline drivers and talking to them about their challenges, the reason why we want to adopt certain behaviours, the reason why we have concerns about that particular operation. Actually engaging at the behaviour point, that's where we see the kind of real benefit. And we've got the stats, like last year was 6% safer than the year before in terms of number of on-road incidents. That's not by coincidence, it's because we're out there coaching drivers consistently to get the outcomes. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is getting behaviours changed, because actually the assets will always be the assets. We get better technology to understand them, but fundamentally it's the drivers who make the decision or what they want to do with them.
Okay, thanks for that. So Jenny, can you point to one thing that's had the biggest impact on driver safety?
I think so. For all of our drivers, be an authorised driver for CAD, there's quite a few requirements for them before they're allowed to drive our vehicles. A lot of that is training, but because we're going for Force Gold, we've also increased the level and the amount of training that our drivers have to do. And it is a requirement, and it's a case of you don't do it, you don't drive. So we have to have this information getting to our drivers. Especially helpful, which we have done for a long time, is the work-related road risk training, which has the VR element, the virtual reality element, because then drivers are actually able to see what the vulnerable road users are seeing. So they see it from a pedestrian's perspective, a horse rider's perspective, even though you don't see many of those riding around East London, funnily enough. But it just enables our drivers to really understand the impact they can have whilst they're driving a company vehicle and whilst they're doing all of these journeys around London. So, yeah, I'd say going through a really kind of heavy element of training has really helped with our safety of our drivers and everyone around us.
Great, thank you. Gareth, same for you. What's the biggest impact?
Yeah, unfortunately for Sean, we installed Samsara into our vehicles April last year, and I really love the in-cab nudge at the point of driver behavior, because it's at that point that then the driver can then change his behavior. I agree with Sean. If it's always going off, then it could be deemed as a distraction. But I think for me, it's about if a driver's constantly not wearing a seatbelt all day, then he does need that nudge to remind him that it needs putting on. And we've seen some really good reductions in driver behaviour with the nudges being given to the drivers at the point of poor driving behaviour, and then we've seen the benefit, the outcome, the other side.
Okay. And Sean, obviously got a lot of experience working with many fleets. What when you look at the various things that they're doing, what are the things that make the biggest impact?
I mean, rather than me talking about the wonderful reports and technology that we bring, I think the biggest thing that we bring to our customers is the training and the onboarding that we give them to understand what our system can generate. I mean, we do some wonderful reports, you know, we do cameras, we do all the bits and pieces you would expect, but that's a means to an end. I think the whole element of where we believe we give the value to the customer is making sure that when they've implemented or when they're implementing telematics, they fully understand what it can do and the kind of reports, whether it be the league tables, whether it be idling reporting, whether it be fatigue reporting. It's all a means to the end. The biggest thing for us is the engagement with the customer when they're introducing it, to say to them, look, let's show you how you get this information. Keep them up to date and aware of what the Quartix system can do. So really, it's the education of what the product can bring to help them manage their fleet more efficiently, more effectively, and safely. So rather than me sort of telling you about all the wonderful reports that happen, it's really about the end user knowing what the system can do and getting the most from it. And that's about ongoing support and training and account management, really.
Okay, thanks. Right. Just ticked over to 3 o'clock, so we have reached the end of today's webinar on safety and fleet, which has been sponsored by Quartix. I'd like to thank you for joining us, and thanks for bearing with us through a few sound issues as well. But a special thank you to my panel for their insights and advice during the course of the last 60 minutes. So we had Tim Fieldhouse, Field Fleet and Managed Services Director at Balfour Beatty, Jenny Suleiman, Senior HSQC Assurance Manager at Keolis Amy Docklands, Gareth Jones, Group Fleet Compliance Manager at Speedy Hire, and of course from our sponsor Quartix, Sean Mayer, Global Sales Director. As I said, there were a couple of sound issues. You can listen again to this webinar via a link that will email out to you, and very often we find that on the recordings the sound is a lot cleaner than actually when you watch it live. So if there was anything that you missed, please do tune into that webinar recording, and you may well hopefully pick up those missed comments. Also, please keep an eye out for all of our Fleet News webinar details. You can find them all on the website, including, of course, our monthly Fleet News at 10 series where we look at the hottest news from the month. That's all from me. Thanks again from my panel, and enjoy the rest of your day.